Okay, so we're live right now for our intro episode. This is the human condition. I'm Vince Orlando,
I'm Sean Davis.
and I'm assuming for this episode that if you've tuned in, you probably know us. So we don't this is our test run here, and we don't need to get too heavy on the intros. We can keep it brief, but. Again, Vince Orlando. I've done some movies, done some TV, been through some struggles in life. Came out on the other end, still struggle, still work daily to be a better person. One day at a time, be better than I was the day before. That type of thing. We don't need to spend too much time on that, but Sean, you.
My name's Sean, from Detroit. Had a lot of struggles, kind of like Vince. Came out on the other end. Just been on a spiritual journey, and I continue to seek everything spiritually that I can, and share my knowledge as I go. Raise the consciousness around me, and maybe help try not have others around me make the same mistakes and struggles that I continue to make. I wasn't exactly a quick learner with it either, so.
I hear that. I hear that. So the reason for the podcast, and when me and you talked, it's I'm a member and a board member also at Renaissance Unity. You also attend. You've done the ministry school there, so you're familiar with the Unity principles.
Yeah.
So we have this men's group, and it meets once a month. And during the men's group, I noticed, it's where a group of guys come together. We're all spiritual minded. Similar unity principles. We are God, God is us, blah, blah, blah. But I noticed that in some of these real deep conversations, there would be these breakdowns, right? And not that we weren't similar in our thought processes towards, what we believe the human experience is about, but it would be on semantics. So what I realized in this is that there's two very distinct languages which use the same words. Obviously we're speaking English, right? But in English, words can have a very different meaning depending on what perspective you're speaking them from. So the word duality is something that kept coming up in our meetings, and there would be disagreements as not so much as to what the concept behind it is, but the literal definition of it. So from a Gnostic perspective, duality is basically good and evil. And in unity principles, well, there's really no good and evil. Things happen. There's higher consciousness, there's lower consciousness, there's frequency. We don't exist in the realm of good and evil. That's more of a material plane type of thing. So when I was using the word duality, I was speaking from the spiritual perspective, meaning we are spiritual beings having a human experience, right? So when I say duality, I mean that we are inherently dualistic by virtue of human birth. So we have to experience life as human beings while we're here, while we're on this plane. That immediately, just the five senses, takes us away from our spiritual nature, right? And we have to work to get back to that spiritual plane. Don't care if you're a Buddha living in Tibet, in the mountains, and all you do is meditate. You're still coming back to the five senses. It has to happen. Even Christ on the cross, as the story goes, he screamed out, "My Father, why hast thou forsaken me?" Because no matter how spiritual, and Christ consciousness is literally named after him, right? But even as conscious as we are as human beings, we're still confined to these five senses. So when I was speaking of duality, I wasn't speaking in terms of good and evil. I was speaking in terms of, no, we are inherently dualistic because we are human. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, when I think of duality, my mind automatically goes to, yin and yang, the light and the dark, and you can't you know, it's you can't merge light into dark without making it lighter. And you can't merge darkness into light without making it lighter.
They both have their place.
Right, and those are the two. It's almost polarity, you know. It's opposites. And on the way to work, you know, I was, you know, I did, you know, I looked at heaven and hell as a dualistic approach. And you know, in Unity, we don't believe in either, really. You know, my spiritual consciousness is going to evolve, and I'm merely having a spiritual experience in this human form that is made pretty much just made up of light anyway, you know. And what I'm learning through and going through is merely a shift in consciousness, which is going to change my dimensional thinking, which is going to raise my vibration. You know, if you are consciously seeking the knowledge,
Right.
you know, some are just going to be where they're at and don't have the desire to change.
And that's
You know?
also okay, you
Right.
know, and within the confines of their journey, whatever that may be.
Right. I mean, how awakened do you want to get? And then you can look at a dualistic approach is like unawakened and awake.
Right. So that was a eye opener to me, and that's kind of where the concept of, okay, well, let's have a show where we just break down semantics, right? Let's get through the dogma. Let's get through these preordained ideologies that you know, which are humanistic, because that's what we are. So we're taught a certain way in school to believe. But when you start to ascend to another plane of thinking, another plane of being, when you start to go to this place, words don't have the same meaning to you anymore. But I catch myself speaking those same words, forgetting that a lot of times the people I'm speaking with, they're not there yet.
And not gonna understand.
No, so it and even within Unity, you know, you know, that it wasn't really an argument, because we all come from a place of love, right? So it's good to have disagreements from a place of love, because you can unpack things, and you can get to, at the very least, common ground, to where, okay, well, maybe I agree, maybe I don't, but I understand what you're saying. So, you know, it was Reverend Glenn, me and him were talking about it, and he said, well, your true nature is you're a spiritual being. Absolutely. Absolutely. And again, going back to the fact that we have to exist on the physical plane, even if we go transcendental in meditation, we're coming back. We have this, I mean, when you achieve that divine consciousness, that God consciousness, well, your purpose on earth, it's not, what are you here for? You know what I mean? You're here to experience with the five senses and ascend beyond that. But yeah, so it wasn't really an argument. It was just we were coming from different places, because yes, I understand your true nature is, as, you know, that of a divine being, right?
Right.
But we're human, you know? We're human, and we have to work to understand that, you know, because before we get to where we are, and, you know, for me and you, and I think for most people, you grow two ways. It's by choice or by trauma. For most people, it's trauma.
Right.
Very rarely, I don't know if it's ever happened, does somebody wake up and say, well, everything I've done up until this point is wrong, I want to change. Something has to happen, right? So, you know, and that goes back to this unity thinking, to where, or even Buddhist, where you have to be grateful for your pain, because you suffer enough to where you want to change things, and then you start to ascend to a different level
Right.
of thinking.
I mean, the Taoist approach is life is suffering, you know. So if we want to take a harsh stance on it, like just being in the human experience is suffering alone.
See, and I agree with that to a certain extent, but a more Buddhist approach is that suffering is a choice. Pain is necessary. You know, we're going to get hit with things, and whether we choose to dwell within the confines of the pain, that's when suffering happens. Now, pain, you learn from it, you grow from it. That's a necessity. That's the yin and yang. That's the duality. But the suffering is a choice, and I think that sometimes people can get lost in that too, and that, well, no, physically, you know, that's a real easy way to look. Well, I suffered. I got hit with cancer. That's pain. I have to suffer. Well, you really don't. You know, you do. You're going to feel physical pain, but it goes. Viktor Frankl, and I know you've read the book, right? A Man's Search for Meaning.
No.
You ever? Well, I mean, Viktor Frankl.
I'm not a big reader, man. You know.
He came up with logotherapy,
Okay.
and it's basically without meaning you're lost. That's the Cliff Note version of this type of therapy. How do you find meaning in your life? So Victor was confined to a concentration camp. His wife was killed. His family was. Everyone was killed. Every day in this camp. I mean, now this is hell on earth, right? That we can't imagine. You know, sitting in the seats that we're sitting in, even in the pain that we've suffered, it's hard to imagine living in a concentration camp where your dignity's been stripped from you. You have nothing. You don't know from one minute to the next if you're going to die or not. Everything you've ever had, everything you've ever loved has been stripped away from you. Now, there was a moment in the concentration camp where Viktor Frankl thought of his wife, and he saw her as if she was standing in front of him, almost this heavenly vision. It gave him something. It gave him hope. It gave him... So within the confines of something that we would perceive as hell on earth, this guy attached himself to meaning beyond him. He didn't have to suffer anymore. That's not to say he didn't get beat by the guards. That's not to say that he wasn't frail and sickly. But there was this thing inside of him that would not allow them to confine him to the hell that they were trying to perpetuate on him. So that, I guess that's the extreme version of... Now, he could have, like everybody else that was dying around him, he could have chose to suffer,
Yeah.
right?
You know Joseph Campbell's hero's journey.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's like almost the makeup. I was thinking about it. The hero's journey in itself represents a cycle, and in that cycle of the hero, he's going through his own duality. You know,
Yeah.
there comes a problem or something, and then he switches over and finds a cause, and then switches over and takes a side, and in this journey, George Lucas based Star Wars on this particular book, and they even have it on YouTube. It's funny because like Deepak, everyone's in this. They show you the hero's journey, but in a YouTube form, it's like an hour long, and every spiritual big dog is in it, giving feedback.
Yeah.
And in that cycle, it's all dualistic pretty much. And the thing is that particular cycle is over and over and over again in our lives, and it's just you may not recognize it, but it's what the premise of our life is, and I can find myself sometimes and suffering without recognizing I'm suffering.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like
yeah.
I won't label certain things that are going through these trials and tribulations, whether it's codependency or, there's a whole gamut of stuff I could list and say and label it as suffering, but I'll tell you my codependent behavior causes tremendous amounts of suffering and frustration, but I won't label it as suffering. I'll label it as life.
Shit happens.
Yeah.
No,
this is my life.
And we talked about that before, and I still use that to this day, because you were the first one that said you said to me, the problem with us is we have a very high threshold for pain.
Oh, huge.
Right. So and here we go back to dualism, and so when you're living. So for me, I grew up, for the most part in poverty. Detroit was a tough neighborhood, and Hazel Park wasn't any lighter. You know what I mean? It was fighting all the time. It was, there were good parts. I'm not going to beat it to death, but at that juncture in my life, I needed to be guarded. You know what I mean? Because physical violence, even at times death, was a threat, a real threat, and I had to be prepared for that. As I grew up, and ventured to, I mean, the globe now. I've been all over the place, and I've seen how different people live, and I started to realize, well, I don't need to live that way anymore because I don't have that threat anymore. It's not. So it became unhealthy for me. So that high threshold for pain never really left. So a lot of times I don't know that I'm in denial in that I'm feeling pain. And this it goes in PTSD therapy. I learned to unpack this stuff and start to look at the nuances in my life and implement daily practices to where if I fall off my meditation, I better figure out why. And this may seem like minuscule to the average everyday person who doesn't have to deal with some of these things, but to me, if I don't brush my teeth before I go to bed, something that simple, that little nuance, I view that as an act of self-destruction or self-hatred. As petty as that may seem, but I have to look at that and I have to say, okay, so, and it may be nothing,
Yeah.
right? But I have to look at
Right.
it. And because the threshold for pain is so high that I don't even know that I'm going through shit at
Yeah.
the time. And like you said, we can, that's just life. Shit happens. Navigate through. We're taught that as men, though.
I'll tell you one thing, if I want a bad day, don't pray in the morning, and I can guarantee I'll have a bad day.
Yeah.
Like a guarantee. I don't ever forget to do my prayer work in the morning or in the evening, because it's almost, I don't know if I want to call it ritualistic. I mean, it's a ritual for sure, and I have a lot of different spiritual rituals, but like brushing the teeth, I'll let it go here and there, but prayer or something that's associated with my spiritual makeup, I don't ever miss, man. There was days when I just skip it,
Yeah.
and there was a lot of suffering involved.
See, and that's the funny thing is, okay, so I have 5 things I have to do every day. And I don't have to do them every day, but I have to be aware that I haven't. So I need to meditate 10 minutes in the morning. It feels good when you're done, right? If it feels good, it does. It's, for me, that's my praying, right, is meditation. So I have to do it. Sometimes I'll just want to lay in bed. Because I have no problem getting up now. I get up at 6 in the morning, 5:30 sometimes. I'm ready to go to the gym. Sometimes I just want to deny myself the act of meditation. 10 minutes, sitting on that pillow, going to a space where I know when I come out, there's a reason for that. So there's that. I need to make better food choices. That's always the one I'm going to work. Make better food choices, do some kind of exercise, read, write. When I do those 5 things in a day, I check my calendar off, and I literally do this. If you go through my office right next to my bedroom that I have to pass every morning, I'll look, and if there's not an X there, well, to me, I didn't live that day. So I make it up. You know what I mean? But if I start to see that this calendar is empty, typically it's the writing, which I love doing. I don't know that I love the act, but I love what the result of that is. And meditation. 2 things that are good for me, 2 things that are fairly simple, yet I want to neglect for some reason. And if I start to get too off course with that, I know there's something going on in my psyche. That's when I got to start doing that PTSD, cognitive processing therapy to myself.
I'll neglect the apple cider vinegar in the morning. That was like a real big one for me for a long time, and now like sometimes it's like I can pass on that. Do you hit the mastermind journal every day?
I don't know.
Man,
I don't mastermind, and I was going to ask you, we got a mastermind session after this if you want to get in on that madness. But
yeah,
I'm not in it like you are.
Yeah, I've been doing it, with my best friend since he found a mastermind journal. I think it was like 2011, and I had gotten away from it because the mastermind group that I was in, we kind of disbanded, and he was like, man, what's this? I was like, man, that's mastermind journal. He was looking at it, and he's like, this looks like some deep shit, man. And I was like, yeah. I was like, man, I was like, it's a year old, so each day is going to be off. But if you want to go mess with it, man, go mess with it. I'm like, the 8 steps are in there. Do what you want to do. It's cool. And, he crushed it by himself.
And it works.
And it works for about 4 months. And then he's like, Big Sean says you're supposed to do this with somebody. And I was like, like, you want a mastermind? He's like, yeah. And, you know, it was interesting because we got back into it 2012, 2013, and I went back to 4T Prosperity the same year. And the years, if we look back at the journals, you can tell how more diligently we got. Now, every page has ink. Every day has ink. I rewrite the affirmation for the day, and then I write out a prayer that's designed for me, my God, and those that I'm about to encounter for the day.
Yeah.
You know, it's amazing, and I really moved away. So there's the month, and then there's the week and stuff, and we still meet for the monthly and the weekly, and it's huge. The results were huge. You know, he went from making, you know, 40, 50 a year to he was like, dude, I made 125 this year. I was like,
For people who don't know, the mastermind principle, it's based on a teaching of Jesus Christ that says, where two or more are gathered in his name, there I am.
yeah.
That's the fundamental.
Jack Boland put it all together.
He created Renaissance Unity.
Yeah.
But that's where the principle comes from, and it really is law of attraction, where there's a group holding each other in which, going back to the human condition, is what we should do more of, rather than pointing fingers and saying you can't do this and you can't do that. If we were to come together in a larger setting and really hold each other in the highest of consciousness, amazing things would be possible. Absolutely amazing, miraculous things that we consider a miracle would be possible.
I think the idea of human beings supporting other human beings is still foreign.
Taboo.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
I'm competition.
Yeah.
I'm in competition with you.
Yeah.
You know, I need the money that you're making. You know, you got my clients.
Fear.
You got this.
Fear
you know?
based.
Yeah. Oh, fear based.
It's fair. I mean, if I don't, you know what I mean, it's
Yeah.
going to get taken from me.
Yeah.
This is good. No,
That's
and
all fear is, man. What am I afraid of losing, and what am I afraid of not getting? And then after that, I even did this thing where it all spider webs from that. Those two basic principles spider web the entire premise of a fear-based life.
yeah, absolutely, and that's what we live, right?
Right.
I mean, and that's what keeps us stuck into what the Gnostics would call the sin side of, and I don't even know if the Gnostics called it sin, but the evil side of duality. That's where you get stuck in
Right.
your
Right.
what we consider humanness.
It's huge. Fear is the biggest spiritual block there is. You know, I don't know of a bigger one.
I don't think there is one. I mean,
Yeah.
it's all fear.
It's all
Yeah.
fear-based, you know. And the thing is, I think a lot of that is my father. I was raised by my dad. My dad really wasn't much for, like, fear-based teaching, you know. It just wasn't part of the household, you know, being free, you know, and recognizing that you always have enough, that you'll always have enough if you work hard. And, you know, if you are doing the GOD, the good orderly direction, and my father is not a religious, you know, his spirituality is Michigan football and Michigan basketball, you know, that's it. But if you are doing the next right thing, and you're helping your brother out along the way, and you are generally kind and caring to other human beings, it's all going to work out.
Yeah, and that's
You know, and keeping track of the dollars and keeping track of, like, what they have and what I don't have isn't going to do you no good, you know.
does you bad. It keeps you stuck in the spot. I mean, it's the law of attraction, man. You manifest it, and that's why even the thought of dualism, it leaves a bad taste in the mouth, because we're so acclimated to what it is to be human.
Well, so enlightened thinkers, you know, with great consciousness, the duality means that we're separate, and we're always, the oneness is what we're searching for. You know, the oneness is what we're searching for. You know, duality really only exists, you know, in the third, fourth, fifth dimension, and in a little bit of the sixth, and then you start merging as one. That the polar opposites are switching around so rapidly that it's merging into one.
Just not on this plane.
Not on this plane.
Not meant to happen on this.
No.
You're meant to experience transcendence in bits and pieces, and then bring that back into your human experience. But it's not for to be permanently there. There's no use for the human experience.
Right. You'd just be chilling
Right.
up in the Himalayas.
Yeah. What are you doing here?
Right.
You know,
exactly. And I think, you're going to need duality for the process of evolution while we're in this dimensional state.
Well, I think, and when I speak of the word God, God has a stigma, right?
Right.
It's
Universe,
to me,
it's all the same.
To
It's all
me,
the same.
consciousness.
Yeah.
It's that divine consciousness. I think everybody, even scientists, can agree that we came from one source. Right? I think we can all agree on that. So when I think of consciousness, in order for us to even be, consciousness has God, the divine, has to shrink itself into this minuscule, finite us. Each one of us has this individual. I think we lose that in human experience, is that each one of us has an individual purpose. Otherwise, the infinite wouldn't have shrunk itself into this finite being so that it could experience. Because we are important. Anybody who wants to say that we're not, they're missing the whole point of consciousness. We're very important. Could consciousness have sprung forth by some cosmic mistake? I say it's anything is possible, but it's not probable. You know what I mean? But I think we lose sight of the fact that we are the way God experiences phenomena. Because whatever God is, whatever consciousness is, doesn't need to experience phenomena in that state. Because it's perfect, right? It's perfect. There's nothing that it doesn't. We are phenomena, in our consciousness that has evolved to the point where we can contemplate ourselves. That is hugely important because everything else exists at a certain level of consciousness, right? Even subatomic particles, they interact perfectly in perfect harmony. Even a supernova, this something that we view as cataclysmic springs forth beautiful things. There's no question in how they're supposed to interact. We get to question it. That's a unique thing. Whether that's happening, we talk about frequency and dimensions and all of that, whether that's happening on different planets or how many billions and billions of years, I believe it's finite or infinite. But to me, that's a beautiful thing. And to me, that's how I embrace my dualism. That's because I believe that I'm supposed to go into this transcendent state, take what I've learned there through the science of introspection, then bring that into the human experience. Things like this. And you see podcasts popping up all over the place where people are having these long form conversations where you get to unpack things. There's no sound bites. There's no 2-minute interview and you got to deliver a point and you have an agenda. It's let's talk about some shit. Let's unpack it. And let's stumble over some words and let's get twisted on semantics and let's unpack this and let's get to a state where we can understand each other,
One thing I learned, I don't know very much. All I know is my own experience.
Right.
And what I'm seeking in my own spiritual journey and what's been revealed to me. Second, I'm not the judge. And third, I'm open to all opinions and, experiences that others have had without judging, and it took me a minute to get there. It took me, I could be, like, when I was younger, I was a real, judgmental motherfucker.
I was an asshole.
Controlling,
out of fear.
Right, pretty much. And I don't think my open-mindedness was as open. I think through pain and trauma, my mind became more open. And the more that I recognized I needed help from my creator, the more open-minded I got. And the thing is that there was something that my God always wanted me to learn was how to ask for help from another human being. That was the toughest lesson. And, especially, my old man didn't go, stop for directions. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
Before GPS and, MapQuest and all that, it was like, no, we'll find it.
Yeah.
We won't be stopping. We'll find it. And, like, you'll be driving around for an hour. And I think part of me being in recovery and having to ask for help, it taught me how to ask for help today. and there's no shame and there's no guilt associated with me asking for help from anyone.
You know why people don't is because people point the finger and judge. You know what I mean? When all we want to do is be able to do that, you know, when somebody does it, not now, but as a young kid, I remember judging people because, oh, this person did that, oh, that. It's it's a paradox. You know what I mean? This dualistic nature of what it is to be human and what it is to try to ascend beyond that. But it's that's hard for me still to ask for help because we get burnt the first time when we're kids when our dad or our mom tells us wasn't really my mom for me, it was my dad. Shut up. You know what I mean? It dismisses you right away. And I struggle with that today. And you know, whenever I'm talking in a group or delivering a speech or writing, speaking with my kids, I have to remember that I came from a place where everything I know now was foreign to me. So I have to find a way without lowering my frequency to meet people where they are.
Right.
You know, and whatever, and that's hard. Okay, so you know, for when I first learned of spirituality and you know what it was to when I first experienced what transcendence, unconditional love was. That was after the birth of it was the birth of my son, ketamine, if I'm being honest. It was the birth of my son, ketamine, and quantum physics. Those three things combined did things to me that a therapist was never able to do. Just opened me up because I felt this unconditional love. And for whatever reason, you know, in my neighborhood, we run from that feeling, right?
Yeah.
You box yourself out. Me, I ran towards it, but it came with so much struggle and so much trauma. And once I experienced that, there was no going back. It was that spiritual point of no return. But it wasn't like, that was the spiritual awakening, but then the work started. Then it got real painful because I couldn't go back to where I was. I could, but it would have taken substances or suicide even, you know.
Once you can go back after having spiritual awakenings into
you can flip flop.
You can step back. You know, all you need to do is become obsessed with materialistic things.
True.
You know?
Yeah, you have to become compulsive in something.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had a lot of spiritual awakenings, and all of a sudden, somehow, some way in my journey, a little codependency kicks in, and the ambition to be financially, you know, larger than what I was, financial insecurity. You give me the right combination, and I'll go chase money, and I'll set all, and I'll lose, I'll lose myself for, you know, I've done it before for a year or two.
Yeah.
But you know, my God will start coming back, like will throw you signs and like what are you doing, and it's like, I got it from here, I got it from here, and you know, my God will continue to throw me signs, and my self-will always, you know, if there's always a saying, if you're being met with a lot of resistance, it's probably not for you. But I'll look at it as like,
this is a challenge.
Yeah, this is a challenge.
Yeah.
You know, I can do this.
Yeah.
You know. And it's just crazy.
That's the fine line, right? You know, because we are programmed to fool ourselves.
Oh,
you know, and then you develop this high threshold for pain, and you know, and in my environment, I didn't get held accountable a lot. You know, I could talk my way out of things. Again, these are things on a material plane that you might view as, those are admirable traits, right? You can make money that way. You can achieve material success, even excess, that way. You can, you know, it feels like there's no real consequences for your action, when in reality, it on a spiritual level, it's eating you up inside. And like you said, the universe is going to slap you in your head. Something's going to happen to pull you back to where you need to be, and you're either going to go there, then there's the alternative, then you don't, you know, and you fall into hell.
It seems as the older I've gotten, the more that I want to experience consequences is less. You know, like when I was younger, I didn't have no problem. Like, you know, you could give me whatever you want. I'm slick. I can do this. I can do that. I had more uh, willingness to either avert or just deal with consequences. As I've gotten older, I've found that consequences for behavior or just shooting moves based out of self, um, man, like I don't want none of that today. Once I deviate from my spiritual principles of that I live by, man, there's consequences once you set that aside and go onto the self and like I'm gonna go shoot these moves and I'm gonna do this. Sooner or later, there's gonna be consequences, whether they're spiritual, whether they're materialistic. Something will make you switch back to having to live on spiritual principles.
You have to. You don't have to. Like, and you made a good point when I said, there was no going back for me. Well, there was. I could have chose to live in a state of compulsion, seeking the next best thing, so that I didn't have to feel so deeply. I could have done that, and I flip flopped. I went back and forth. Always got pulled back. Always got pulled back. I consider that to be lucky. Because some people, I know so many. Well, I know you know too. So many people that didn't.
It's the truth, though. Once I'm exposed to the truth, what the fuck am I gonna do? Go live in a lie?
But and that's the thing. You
pull a blanket over my head and say, "All right, we're back here."
But you have to admit it to yourself that that's the truth. You know how long? Well,
Yeah.
How long did? I mean, there's still times where I try to deny the truth, not intentionally, but that monkey mind will start creeping in, and I'm so good now at capturing the nuances, but I'm still not. My ego would tell me I'm free from it,
oh, of
and
course.
then set me up for destruction so that it can creep in again. But the programming is so deep, and the work that it takes to. I mean, it's. But again, it's a beautiful, beautiful thing because that's how you ascend your dualistic nature. And I don't think the word dualism is a bad word. I think it's just what it is.
Right.
It's just what it is. It's yin and yang. It's cause and effect. It's.
There's a book called Lessons in Truth. It's a Unity book.
Yeah.
Emily Cady.
Yeah.
If you want like a book that will clear a lot of like clouding, after that book, man, it was like I had a new pair of glasses on. It was very eye-opening, and she kind of writes it from a Christ consciousness perspective and stuff. But it was a huge game changer for me in my spiritual journey, and we read that at the Detroit Urban Ministerial School, and it was just like whoa.
Yeah. And it is whoa.
Yeah.
When you get to that place, and I still have a lot of, you never stop learning, growing. I mean, and it's all about frequency elevation. So when you get to that next level to where you've transcended that last thing, well, here's a new thing, and you can view that as a victim, right?
Right.
The world is against me, or, okay, well, here's a new challenge. So, but that can easily play into, that's that fine line to where sometimes it's not a challenge to be met. Sometimes it's not for us, Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it is. Or maybe the challenge is recognizing that it's not for us. You know what I mean? And that's that maybe the codependency, maybe the fear of abandonment, that thing that needs to be overcome. These attachments that we have to our subconscious programming, and it's our choice now. It's for me and you. It's our choice. For a lot of the people in Unity, it's their choice. A lot of people, it's not their choice.
I think if you unravel a lot of beliefs that you were brought up with or that you've learned, a lot of those beliefs are bullshit.
Yeah.
And I had to unravel a lot of bullshit beliefs.
And it's hard.
And once I unraveled it, I'm in a place where, well, where do I go from here? I'm in a place where I can absorb experience and knowledge with a whole new perspective.
Right.
It's all about changing my perspective and my perception that is based in divine truth. it's always going to be in divine truth. What separates me is how I interpret the information in the reality that I'm getting.
And see, you're speaking in a language that I understand deeply, but a lot of this is, we're saying words, and these
Right,
words
right.
have different meaning. And I was talking to my girlfriend the other, it was a while ago. We watched A Star Is Born. Have you seen that?
No.
It was great. I thought Bradley Cooper was amazing in it, but I understand him. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The darkness, I get it. Like I know that world very well, and and like a lot of people, they would say the decision that was made to, in any suicide, there's people that'll point the finger and say that was weak. Well, that's the easy way out. And I've never wanted to kill myself, even though you have those thoughts, I wish it would just end, that kind of, but you move on with life and whatever, you get through your darkness. I've never wanted to really do it because I would have done it, right? But I think I've been on the cusp to where I can understand it, but I've never been in that place. And I was trying to explain to her, I'm like, well, he couldn't see beyond where he was. So you can't point a finger and say that you should be better, or he should have made a different decision, or that was no, the hell that he exists in that moment, or she or whoever exists in that moment before they actually make the choice to do that thing, that's hell. You know what I mean? And I wouldn't wish that pain, even if it's instantaneous pain, to lose all hope, even subconscious hope. Because even the guy who's homeless on the street, there's something in him that keeps him from taking his own life. You know what I mean? To where you might feel bottom of the barrel, but there's some shred of hope in that subconscious that keeps you going from day to day. Something, even though you don't consciously believe it could get better, something in you says it can. And to be in a place where that's stripped from you, that's a pain I don't want to experience. You know what I mean? And I can't point a finger at a person. I can only sympathize and try to empathize with that. But
I attempted suicide, and it was. I thought I was going to be successful, and there was no hope. There was no hope for a while, and I had been praying, number one, to die for a long time. My alcoholism was in full effect, and it had been full effect for a while. I'm a real alcoholic. I'm a 24/7 drinker when I drink. There's no breaks. There's no nothing. It's got to be around the clock. And it had been like that for a couple years. And, I ran a knife right up my arm. And I remember specifically that night. And there just was no more hope. There just was, I was done.
that's an empty. That's a
There,
void, man.
yeah.
That your humanness is stripped from you, but not in a good way.
I felt that God, as I had known God, had abandoned me. Like, we wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be at this point if you were here. The thing is, I had proof that you existed. For a long time I had proof. And I got to a point where it's not that I no longer believed. It's that I don't believe that this is going to change because you have not helped me. I've been sick this long. Like, we're going on 4 or 5 years. I was an alcoholic at 13. I was able to, kind of change things here and there through like marijuana maintenance and stuff. But when it comes down to it, I'm just a whiskey alcoholic. Just give me the whiskey and stay out of my way, and don't come around me because I'm going to burn everything down. All relationships, jobs, any material possessions, forget about them.
Yeah.
And it was just to the point where, like, I was tired of living.
In the way that you knew life was.
Right.
Yeah.
And all hope was gone.
Yeah.
All hope was gone. And I'll be honest with you, even being in recovery for as long as I've been in recovery, and all the spiritual things that I've seen and been able to experience, living in the human flesh is still difficult for me.
It is.
I always try to remind myself that I'm not separate from God, and I can feel that, and I believe that wholeheartedly, and my God lets me know 24/7 usually. There's a feeling that I have as I'm on the earth that keeps me connected, that I'm always connected, but it's still hard for me to maneuver around emotions. Um, you know, explaining emotions to another human being, especially one that you care about, it's hard. It's just hard for me to do those things.
But it's in that difficulty, it's in that difficulty where the next level of your frequency lies. It's navigate, because for me, I have to intentionally gravitate towards those emotionally difficult situations, because emotions are just emotions. And when they flare up like that, it's hard for me too. But I make it a point, and I don't do it all the time. I'm not always successful at it.
Yeah.
But I'm better at catching them now and saying, I got to tell this person this thing. Owning your own business, there's sometimes you got to let go of some friends.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
In the old neighborhood, you don't do that. You're loyal, but
Right.
that loyal was really codependency. That wasn't,
Right.
you know what I mean? So you got to, I see these challenges now when you view it through the lens of be grateful for your pain. Things are happening for me, not to me. If you can, and it doesn't happen in the spur of the moment, but if you can ground yourself in that line of thinking, I don't know, have you ever read Radical Forgiveness?
Messed around with it.
That book's a life changer.
Picked it up, put it down, picked it up, put it down type deal.
Yeah, I did for a while too, but I've read it a couple times now, and just, at a soul level, how everything, if we can view everything, because here's the thing, everything in the universe exists in relationship to one another, right?
Right.
Everything. That's
Everything's
causality.
connected. Everything's connected.
It's connected, and when we have the illusion of separateness, well, the relationship that we have to that seemingly separate thing, that's important, very important. So, when I read that book, I was able to unpack some old relationships, romantic and otherwise, and say, wow, that relationship pulled out of me, and it wasn't comfortable, right? Like, it wasn't comfortable going through that, but when I was able to see that person unintentionally on a human level, on the material plane, but at a soul level, was giving me exactly what the hell I needed to experience at that given moment. And I missed it so many times,
Yeah.
I just went through it and said, I would point the finger, or I would say, that's what life is, and move on to the next thing. Then it would manifest itself in another way, more clever way, but it was still the same thing in a different form. You know what I mean? So I continue to go through these things, and I'm sure I'm going through it now in some form. If I don't know what it is,
Right.
I know some things and I work on them. There's some things I haven't discovered yet, and that'll have to get pulled out of me. But just looking at everything as a mirror, everything. When somebody cuts me off in traffic and I go to asshole mode,
Yeah.
something's off. You know what I mean? There's a relationship there that I need to evaluate, because I deem myself as spiritual, and I want to ascend to this Christ consciousness. Yet I just called this person an asshole because they were able to pull that out of me in an instant. You know what I
Haven't
mean?
you cut someone off accidentally?
Me?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So it's funny because I've learned with driving's real big. Number one, I'm pretty hands free. I worked real hard at not texting and driving. It can wait. And I work real hard, but I watch a lot of drivers be texting and driving. And so it's like
one of them's me.
So someone cut me off. I understand, because I too have cut people off.
Mm-hmm.
But now my thing is, I gotta see you. Are you on the phone?
Yeah.
Are
I
you
wanna see
on
what
the
you
phone?
look like.
I need to see if you're on the phone, and then I look, and then there was a time where one of my spiritual mentors was like, "Don't look. There's no reason to look.
There's not.
All you can do is, I too have cut someone off, so it's like forgiving them as you go." Immediately,
Yeah.
and just understand that you too have cut someone off, and not look and just be on your way.
Because really, what does the look do but fuel this subconscious finger pointing, this judgment, this
All the
I'm better
judgments that depending on the car, on the rims, the license plate. If you have stickers, I can create a scenario in my mind.
I know who you are.
Yeah,
Exactly. I thought you were that.
and then I look at, you know, like, you know, you see them, you know, Kermit the Frog memes and stuff. It's like, you know, looking at, you know, and then what am I doing? Like, you know, the truth is, universe all loves us equally. You know, you know, some people just, you know, I can. There's, you know, sometimes it's cutting people off, and just going to be the way it is.
Yeah.
You know,
Absolutely. And yeah, on that, the way that it is I didn't turn Wi-Fi on, so if anybody was sending a message, we apologize.
Oh, right on.
Yeah, because I didn't turn the Wi-Fi.
First go around, brother.
Yeah,
It's all good, you know.
this is we're unpacking this too,
Right.
the technicalities, but
Yeah.
but yeah, no, it really is. It really does feed that part of ourselves that doesn't need to be fed, right? But it feels so natural, you know, because I still do it, but I catch myself. When I say asshole, I say that person. I have to have a conversation. That person's not an asshole. You don't know that
I
person.
think it's just part of my ego still wanting some sort of validation because I'm no longer there. You know, I'm no longer operating from my ego a whole lot. So, like, my ego, when it finds opportunities
That's yeah.
to peek its head out, like, you know, like, I'm better than, you know, you.
Yeah.
You know, I'm a better driver than you. You know, I can come up with all these things, and I need the validation by looking who just cut me off.
Yeah.
That way, my ego can find some sort of satisfaction and validation. When in reality, the last thing I need is my ego being validated by looking at who just cut me off.
By judgment.
Right, by judgment. Like, why don't I just continue on my spiritual journey?
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
like, they're on theirs. Why are you upset?
I remember I didn't realize how angry I was, and I didn't know what the physicalities of constant anger were. And I, you know, for whatever reason, for years and years, it escaped me that I had calluses on my hands just from driving, regular city driving,
yeah.
or that there was a hole dug into every floor mat that I ever had because I would press my heel. I didn't know that I was that tense. I had no idea, and I remember when I lived out in L.A., a girlfriend of mine told me, she's like, "Why are you so angry?" Because I would want to fight people. Oh, come follow me, blah, 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 this.
LA traffic, a whole nother story, though. You know?
But even still, you know, and it did.
I know.
And I remember her saying, "Why are you so angry?" And then I would yell about how I'm not angry. Oh, I'm not fucking angry. That motherfucker. All this shit, all this spouting, all this shit. I look back on that now, and I'm so disconnected, but I'm not, because even in that little asshole to where I have to talk myself off that ledge, it's still there.
What is it, the 401? Is that the 401 that's out there?
405.
Yeah, the 405, the 405.
Fuck them all.
When I lived in Long Beach, you know, my the guy I was living with, you know, his family and stuff, we was working in, like, you know, Hollywood and stuff, and we take back roads, you know, to and from, you know, L.A. from Long Beach. And
you can't even do that anymore.
I know. One of my boys was like, "Dude, now the back roads is gridlocked."
There ain't no damn back roads. I was out there with it was the American Film Market, and we were staying in Beverly Hills, and the market's in Santa Monica. That's a 15-minute drive.
Yeah.
So I think I'm showing my guys from Michigan, hey, no, we're going to take every road was blocked. It took us 2 hours and 15 minutes for a 15-minute drive to get from one place to the other. It was insane. It made me mad.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But if you unpack that too, you gotta, when you start getting real with yourself, well, you know where you are.
Yeah.
Right? You know the place you came to. We don't prepare ourselves. It's when you go into a relationship with a significant other, I do now. I prepare myself for, I know what my flaws have been in the past. I know where I'm weakest. I prepare myself going in. I do my best to look at and that's what cognitive processing therapy was for me, is that I have to unpack everything. I have to ask myself, what's the reality of this situation? This emotion came, is it based in reality, or is it based on some subconscious programming that I haven't let go of? And it's a process. But I think we're getting close to our time. We've got about 5 minutes.
Yeah, I don't really prepare myself for relationships. I just let it roll. I know mistakes that I've made in past relationships.
Well, that's preparation. knowing
but
that.
I've fixed them usually before I get into another one, because I don't ever want to take. I want to be better than. I always want to be better than the
better
last
version,
one. You
right.
know,
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
what did I learn from? You know, ooh, I was still doing a bunch of criminal stuff. Girl didn't like that. You know, I was obsessed with money and all this stuff, and I wasn't really present.
Yeah,
And then you learn. You just keep learning. You just keep evolving.
that's the hope, right?
Yeah, you know.
That's what it's supposed to be.
You know, my stepdad always used to say corny stuff when we was younger, like, you grow as you go. And I was like, man, what the fuck? You know what? I end up saying that now. You know, like, I work in substance abuse and stuff, and I tell the dudes in early recovery, man, it's like it's a grow as you go kind of life, man. You know, it's just, it is what it is, and you want to be better and smarter than you were yesterday.
You don't want to hear that when you're in crisis.
Oh.
That's the last shit you want to hear.
They're all in brainstem, man. You know.
Yeah. That's that. Well, duality.
Yeah.
You know, and the unfortunate part of our dualistic nature, some people will never see past their duality and to the oneness of what we truly are. You know, to these spiritual beings having human experience. To not at least and you do experience it in little glimpses through love, through you know, for me, if I look up at the stars when I'm having shitty thoughts, I look and immediately I'm connected to something. I can't really explain what it is, but it, you know, that I grabbed this bracelet, it means something to me. There's something that takes me to only for an instant, but it's enough to pull me out of the bullshit. I had to endure a lot of pain to get to the point to where I sought those things out, but you know, I think about it a lot, and, you know, especially with when you have kids, you're like, I know they're not hearing what I'm saying, right? I know for a fact, like you just said, we remember them when the time's right? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And all we can do is try to be present, and I think that's what this show is going to be, is just us being present when we have guests in.
Yeah.
You know, we're all just present in this moment. There's no agenda. Let's chop it up. And
No boundaries.
No boundaries, no judgment. Let's have some conversation and see what's out there. You know, because there's just too much. There's too much finger pointing. There's too much blame. There's too much hate, man. You know, it's, you know, we live in, I call pop culture a disease.
Yeah.
Because it is. You know,
Oh, yeah.
and we've been confined to that most of our lives. That's why I like seeing these long form conversations popping up and having them be Joe Rogan, man. He's killing it.
Yeah.
You know, Jordan Peterson, you know, a guy that I don't agree with everything on, but I love. I see where he comes from, because he's got the freedom to be able to lay these things out.
Right.
You know, I think I have hope. A lot of people have lost hope in humanity, and but I haven't. I think we're on the cusp of something great. You know, despite what the media wants to tell us, right? I think we're on the cusp of something great, and I think it's things like this. Not even this. People's willingness to speak to each other.
You have to find those that are delivering the truth, and I won't find that on channel 247.
Absolutely not. Their truth.
Right, it's
Or
their
just give me
truth.
your truth.
Their
You don't need
agenda.
you don't need my
Right,
truth, right? Let's,
I don't have an agenda here.
right.
I really don't. I'm just enjoying the journey.
Yeah.
You know, God put me down here, help some people out, maybe, you know, connect the light to them a little bit, and enjoy the ride. I'm really just here to enjoy the ride.
Me too, and I'm curious to know what that ride is for you and everybody else. Curious. I want to know.
Yeah.
I want to know. Tell me, because my journey hasn't been completely right, you know. But yeah, so we got to wrap it up. We'll continue this. For anybody whose messages we missed while we were in our first session, we will get to you. You know, like I said, we're just feeling this whole thing out, getting the technicalities down, but hope you enjoyed.
I thought this was a pretty good first episode, man.
Yeah, well, we got a lot to go. I mean, we could sit in here for hours upon hours and bore people to tears. But you know, the people that are listening, they already know what we're talking about. Like they came in knowing what was up.
And the thing is to bring the new ones along and let them catch up.
That's the intent.
Nothing wrong with getting caught up.
That is, if there's any hope or intent for this, it's that we'll fall on some new ears that need to hear some things, and nobody has made us we're not professionals in this. We've garnered our masters through a series of traumas and coming out on the other side. And anybody that we bring in here, we hope they're, no matter what label you have attached to your name, here we're open. Here we
Right.
just lay it all out, and we hope that it leads somewhere special for somebody. All right, Sean. I
Sounds good,
appreciate
brother.
it.
Mics are off. All right, good first show. Hate to kick you out so fast, but someone else is scheduled for the studio at 7. And sometimes they write it, so I just wanted to make sure you can get
Oh, I
interrupted.
guess it.
So. Excuse me.
Oh, yeah, they're.
I saw a couple comments on the wall.
Yeah.
Oh, it's all right. We'll figure it out. We'll get the camera set up on the computer next time.